To the top story at this hour, Iran wants diplomacy, but not talks with the United States of America. This was the overwhelming message from Iran's Foreign Minister Javads Zarif in India's capital, New Delhi. From calling U.S. leaders arrogant and ignorant to saying that they were bedfellows of the Islamic State, WION now brings you the key highlights of Javad Zarif's combative speech. Take a look.
When they assassinated a revered general in Iraq, violating Iraqi sovereignty, they thought, as Secretary Pompeo tweeted, that people would be dancing in the streets of Tehran and Baghdad. Actually, he picked up a small gathering of a few and tweeted that we rid the region of a whatever he want to call him, and then people are dancing. That showed two things which are very dangerous, and when combined it becomes even more dangerous: ignorance and arrogance. And when you become an arrogant ignorant or an ignorant arrogant, it becomes a disaster, particularly if you have a lot of power. That has been fueling mayhem in the region. Now we had this disaster of the shooting of a civilian airline. Accidental shooting, but shooting nevertheless. 180 families are mourning the loss of very, very bright young people. We lost a lot of very bright minds. Why did it happen? Because there was a crisis. People make mistakes, unforgivable mistakes, but it happened in the time of a crisis. We need to make sure that these crises will be prevented. The United States didn't like General Soleimani, although he was the single most effective force against Daesh. If you don't believe me, see they're celebrating. Who are celebrating the death of Soleimani? Not the ordinary people. In 430 Indian cities, they mourned his death. Two people are celebrating: President Trump and Pompeo and Daesh.
And now joining us live from Tel Aviv in Israel is Mr. Meir Javad Anfar, Iranian Israeli Middle East analyst and co-author of The Nuclear Sphinx of Tehran. Meir Javad Anfar, thank you so much for being with us on the broadcast. Talk to us. How would you read those audacious statements coming in from Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif?
Well, he's very angry. He's obviously very angry. He's under tremendous pressure at home in Iran for two reasons. One of them is the killing of Qasem Soleimani, and the other one is the shooting down of the airliner, which, according to New York Times investigation, was not shot down by just one missile, but by two. He's under a lot of pressure at home from the hardliners who are trying to sideline anybody who wants to talk to the U.S. Mr. Zarif was one of those people, so he's under pressure from them, and he's also the whole system, the whole Iranian government and the regime are facing a fierce backlash from the people of Iran. And this includes Mr. Zarif himself for not telling the truth for 3 days, of ossificating, and saying, no, there's no way this is a missile. Anyone who says it's a missile that shot down the plane is playing to American propaganda. And after 3 days coming and saying, well, actually, it was a missile, and it was. So he's under tremendous pressure, and you can see it, basically.
All right.
Sorry, go ahead.
All right, Mayor, I also wanted to ask you, one is those comments coming in from Mr. Javad Zarif, and the other is time and place. Time and place is everything. In this instance, it is coming in from India, India's capital, New Delhi. Iran's foreign minister in India on a 3-day visit. This comes before India hosts U.S. President Donald Trump next month, in all likelihood. In that sense, and India and Iran have a long-standing relationship. So Javad Zarif is pitching for his country in this context has so many other ramifications.
Well, look, he's very angry by, probably he's very angry by the fact that your country has good relations, your leader, Mr. Modi, has good relations with the United States, and that India is abiding by most of the sanctions. It's not going to work. India is not, in my opinion, India is not going to reduce its relations with the Trump administration. You have a huge business interest, the bilateral business interest. But he's doing his job basically, and to be honest with you, I think one of the things he said, I think really will undermine Zarif's credibility in that Daesh and only Pompeo and Trump are celebrating. Look, what Mr. Zarif doesn't say is that Soleimani was responsible for the killing of 603 American soldiers between 2003 and 2011. If somebody had killed 603 Russian soldiers, Putin would have eliminated him long before Trump took the decision to Qasem Soleimani. Also, Qasem Soleimani was responsible for helping the Assad regime, which has killed 500,000 Muslims in Syria. And this is why Mr. Zarif says, oh yes, 430 Indian cities that were mourning Qasem Soleimani's death. There were many more Muslims who resented what Qasem Soleimani did.
All right, but then again, Mr. Javad Zarif comes in with the biggest counter of all. Qasem Soleimani, according to Iran's foreign minister, was the biggest force of resistance against the Daesh, against the Islamic State terror group, and now he is gone. So he is saying the two people who are celebrating are the US and its allies, and of course, Daesh.
Well, that's partially true. Mr. Soleimani was protecting Iranian interests in Iraq by fighting Daesh, but he wasn't alone. What Mr. Zarif doesn't say, and of course foreign ministers are, they have a line, they have a message to give, they have a message to read, is that it was in conjunction with American help that Daesh was defeated. Without American help, Daesh would not have been defeated. Let me give you a case in point. You remember when Mosul was under the control of Daesh for, I think, was for like 3 years. The forces, the Iraqi popular mobilization forces, which are under the command of Qasem Soleimani's protege, Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, they attacked many times Mosul, but they couldn't kick out Daesh. The only time they could kick out Daesh was with the help of U.S. Air Force. So I think Mr. Zarif is being a little disingenuous, presenting Qasem Soleimani as the side that was responsible for the biggest force fighting Daesh, while he discounts American influence and he says America is celebrating. I think that's dishonest.
All right. Let's get to this whole issue of a proportionate response. Now, we've moved beyond Qasem Soleimani now, and even before Qasem Soleimani, there was the killing of 25 soldiers, which Zarif described as killing of Iraqi military personnel in return for the killing of one U.S. civilian contractor. Is that proportionate response?
Look, it depends how you look at it. If you look at it from just that incident, it's not a proportionate response. But you have to look at it from the fact that the Americans, from 2003 to 2011, have lost 603 of their soldiers by operations from Mr. Qasem Soleimani's controlled militia. And they didn't do anything. Now the Americans are taking action. So if you just look at it from that point of view, it's disproportionate. But if you look at the timeline of what Qasem Soleimani was doing to American forces in Iraq from 2003 until now, the response of the U.S. was not disproportionate.
All right. All of this is happening, and the U.S. is watching all of this. The U.S. is going to make a big visit to India. The president making his maiden trip to India in all likelihood in February. And India right now finds itself in a very precarious position between Iran and the U.S.
Very important. You're right. India is developing the Chabahar port in Iran. It's very important for the stability of Afghanistan, but now it's more difficult to do that because of U.S. sanctions. Chabahar would have bypassed Pakistan and supplied Afghanistan with goods, and that would have been very good for the stability of Afghanistan and very good for developing Iran's Sistan and Baluchistan province. That's unfortunately now that's been undermined because of the sanctions. And also the sale of oil. Yeah, we have a lot of Indian companies doing business with Iran. These have been undermined. Look, I think, quite frankly, in my opinion, Trump, when he walked out of the Iran nuclear deal, he made a mistake. That was a mistake to walk out of the deal. Some disagree, but I think that was a mistake. But at the same time, we also have to realize that the Iranians have also helped this very, very negative atmosphere.
Right, it was a big mistake to walk out of the deal. Mayor Javads Anwar, hold on to that thought. Let's not quickly get a couple of more instances of what Javad Zarif, Iran's foreign minister, said at the Conference of World Leaders in India's capital, New Delhi.
It was an unprovoked attack abusing Iraqi territory against an Iraqi guest inside Iraq. We took action in self-defense under Article 51 of the Charter against a military attack on our military personnel in a foreign land by targeting the base from which the attack had come from. That Soleimani went to Iraq not only to deliver a diplomatic message to the Prime Minister of Iraq, but also to calm down the Iraqis who were enraged by the United States killing 25 Iraqi members of Iraqi armed forces for the killing of one U.S. contract. You call that proportionate?
We have a very official channel through the Swiss where we send messages to the United States, and we did send the message to the United States the night of the missile attack, our action in self-defense, that this was self-defense, that we have concluded our self-defense, and that if the United States responds, it will receive response from Iran, because our action was in reaction to the United States.
And we still have Mr. Mayor Javads Anwar joining us live from Tel Aviv in Israel. Mayor, talks with the U.S. You've heard Zarif say a couple of things which made a lot of sense, because he said that if they're going to walk out of the nuclear deal, what is the guarantee that if we strike a deal with Trump today, it will hold good for even at least next 10 months?
The Trump walking out of the deal really has made life difficult for many different countries. And I don't think Mr. Zarif is going to strike a deal with Mr. Trump. Again, as he said, it's November. They're waiting for November elections in the U.S. But if Trump is re-elected, they're going to have to reach a deal with the U.S. To be honest with you, the Iranian economy is doing absolutely terribly. And I'm not sure they can hold on. And also, there's a rising anger in Iran by the mismanagement and by the whole system in Iran, blaming America for most of the troubles and making people walk on American flags and burning American flags. And there's a backlash against that. So, so for now, this is a short term. I don't expect the Iranians to talk to Trump.
Right. And he did, Javad Zarif did speak a lot about what the economic sanctions of the U.S. have done to Iran and its economy. He's called it a crime. He's called it that's clear violation of international law. He said starvation and genocide are some of the biggest crimes that any country can commit, and these sanctions do exactly that.
No, I'm sorry, it's not starvation. I think that's just, let me be diplomatic, playing with the truth. It's not starvation.
No, but Javad Zarif did speak about food and medicines and restrictions on them because of the sanctions, which will lead to starvation.
No, the only things that are unfortunately not getting through in some quantities is cancer drugs, and I agree. And the Americans have a lot more to do in order to speed up this issue, and it's just a banking issue. People don't want to do business with Iran, but starvation, it's not going to lead to starvation. Iran has got enough money for food, and that I don't agree with. But to say, I don't agree with those sanctions. I don't think Mr. Trump should have imposed them in the beginning. He should have continued with those with the nuclear deal. But at the same time, the Iranians did so much during Obama after the nuclear deal to undermine people who supported the nuclear deal, such as as soon as the deal was approved and he went to action, They knew that Obama is under attack from the pro-Israeli lobby in America, so they tested a missile that said on it on Hebrew, Israel must be wiped off the face of the earth. Now, what kind of a message is that to send if you're trying to improve relations? So, that has also created this very, very bad atmosphere. But I think, again, Mr. Zarif is being a little bit disingenuous when he says starvation and the medicine. They're getting most of the medicine through.
All right, and he also made a pitch to the European Union saying that Europe doesn't have to follow in the footsteps of the US. They can delineate in their relationship with West Asia and Iran in particular.
Yeah, look, the Iranians are understandably very upset because now Boris Johnson is following the Trump line on Iran. Before, the British were not doing that. The British were part of the EU3, Germany, France, and UK. They believed in the previous nuclear deal, but Boris Johnson, for British domestic purposes, I think, has now basically wants the whole deal redone. And this has got the Iranians very worried. In terms of France and Germany, they're doing their best to keep the deal alive. Look, the French and the Germans cannot force their companies to do business with Iran. They can only encourage them. So if you're a French company, let's just imagine Renault, okay? You have two choices. Either do business with Iran, which is a much smaller market, or do business with America. You have to choose between one of those. So, of course, they're going to choose business with America. And this is making the Iranians very angry. I can understand why they're angry, but they can't expect the French or the Germans to literally force and threaten their companies to do business with Iran, because they can't do that.
Mayor Javad Anfar joining us with that perspective live.